Well, now we're going to switch modes slightly because Richard Murphy, our next speaker, is coming to us online. So I hope Stuart up the back has got matters in hand there. Our timetable's a little bit out of sync, so hopefully we haven't kept Richard waiting. Oh, there he is. Hi, Richard. Can Richard hear me?
Waiting with me.
Excellent. Thank you. So Richard Murphy, again, is somebody that probably needs no introduction to a lot of people in this room. Prolific blogger, economist, actually accountant, I believe, but man of many interests, many words and many talents.
Yeah, nothing at all.
Oh, I can't hear him. Oh, well, that's all right. Just tell him I was saying really nice things about him. Say again? Okay, I was just introducing you there, Richard, saying a man of many interests, many talents, economist, accountant, prolific blogger, and just personally for me, one of the things I really appreciate about Richard's blog, oh, he's frozen on the screen there, that's a great expression. The discussion that goes on around the myriad topics that he posts about on his blog, are, the discussions that go on that blog are really, really valuable. Even in conferences like this, you don't get an awful lot of chance to have those depth of conversations. So anyway, Richard is going to talk to us today about the economy, perhaps. So I'll take it away for you. Are we going to do questions at the end of this? It's a bit tricky with all the technology. Yes, definitely. Okay, so we'll give you a nod at 20 minutes, unless you're an excellent timekeeper yourself, and then we'll move to questions from there. Is it okay? Over to you.
And they say, we understand in Ireland, but why in Scotland? And my answer is always the same. If you don't understand why I would have done what was necessary a century or so ago in Ireland, you don't understand why I support what is going on in Scotland now. Tim suggested to me I should talk about money this afternoon. And in fact, he didn't say, as such, talk about the economy. Money was to be the theme. And I've spoken about money on many occasions, and many of you will have heard me. And it's great to follow two friends, Robin and Craig. I've listened to both of those presentations, and I hope I live up to the standard. But I was reflecting this morning on what to say, and I decided to start with St. Paul, which is something I don't think I've ever done in my life before, and Corinthians 13. And I promise you, this isn't going to be a sermon, but there, St. Paul talked about something which, if you're familiar with Christian weddings, is very commonly read at those events, because he talked about faith, hope, and charity, which is sometimes interpreted as love. And he said, the greatest of these is love. And why did I think about that? Because, of course, I was thinking about money. And economists say that there are three characteristics to money: that it's a store of value, it's a facilitator of exchange, and a unit of account. And what I want to say to you, rather St. Paul style, is that the greatest of these is the unit of account. And that's not just because I spent 42 years as a chartered accountant, even though I'm not anymore, and there's a long story behind that. What I want to talk about is money and why it matters, particularly in Scotland. And I know our next session is about that as well, but I'm sort of building a bridge into it because I've thought about this issue for a very long time. And I'm thinking about it again right now. And if any of you do read my blog at the moment, my wife and I are exploring the ideas of quantum mechanics and quantum biology and how they might apply to the whole issue of the economy. And one of the massive problems we've had is to describe what part of the quantum structure could be the analogy for money? And the answer is it's very hard to find one because money as such doesn't exist. And that's the great problem that we have when we talk about money in an independent Scotland. You're actually talking about something that as such doesn't exist. I know people think it's notes and they think it's coins and they're used to the ones they've got and they'll feel it's unfamiliar if they don't have those ones and they have to have some different ones of the sort Tim's printed or whatever else it might be one day. But it isn't real in that sense. Money is just a unit of account. And a unit of account is an irreducible form of information. And in that sense, by the way, this is quantum, because in quantum, quite literally, quantum means how much. That's what the term means. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about money. How much? And we need to understand it like that and begin to talk about money in that way, because money is just data. How much potential is there in Scotland? Because money doesn't record wealth as such. You can have a pile of money and it doesn't imply anything. It's what it's used for that creates wealth. Money isn't wealth. Money is the potential to create wealth. And why we need to think about who controls money is in Scotland is how you want to use money to release that potential in Scotland. And money isn't, and money is not value as such. It's a measure of the capacity to deliver value. Again, different from the thing that it's conventionally talked about by most conventional economists. We're not as such recording transactions. We're looking about the capacity to undertake transactions. And Craig's just been talking about that with regard to those small builders. They have the capacity to build 5 houses. Why aren't we releasing it instead of giving the money to Persimmon? This is important. It's the question that money begs of us, and it's why we need to think about money differently. But what money can't be is value in itself, because it isn't value, it's data on who owns value and where that value is located, and perhaps as importantly, about who that value is going to be released for, in other words, whose benefit. And here, what Robin had to say seems to me to be so important. And where is it going to be released? Is it going to be released for landowners who are investing in credits, carbon credits in Scotland? Is it going to be invested for the Canadian Pension Fund? Or is it going to be released for the potential and value of the people of Scotland? And that's why the debate about this unit of account we call money is so important. Money is there to record the potential, to record the delivery of value, and to provide an opportunity for government to influence that process of delivery so that outcomes which are socially desirable for Scotland as a whole are possible. And in this sense, remember that money and tax are the flip side of each other. Governments create money. They also have to destroy it if they're going to control inflation. And they destroy it by literally taxing it out of existence. Quick thought, hadn't got this prop ready, but that's why I wrote the book, The Joy of Tax. The book that I had to explain to my students involved tax, the most exciting 3-letter word ending in X in the English language, of course. And tax has that enormous potential to direct things. So this is a government-focused issue. But that said, we still know that money is intangible. It's created on the most powerful instrument known to humankind. It is the keyboard. That's what I batch every day to write all those blogs, normally 3 or 4 before breakfast. Sad man that I am. But it's also the place where we type the numbers that create money every day. Money is created by banks simply by going plus £10,000 if that's what you want to borrow in a person's current account, and minus £10,000 in a person's loan account. You could swap the numerators in both those cases depending on which side of the transaction you are. But that's all it takes to create money. But the fact is that that then poses an enormous question. Who do we have faith in? I'm going back to St. Paul now. Who do we have faith in to create that money, to record that value, and to oversee its release into the economy for the benefit of the people of Scotland? Who do we have hope in to deliver that value? And perhaps, and let's just push that phrase from St. Paul a little further. Do we want the people who are doing that to do it out of charity for Scotland? Or do we want them to do it out of love for Scotland? And the two are, as far as I can see, fundamentally different. If you're talking about charity for Scotland, you're talking about the very mean form of charity that comes out of Westminster. If you talk about love for Scotland, you talk about money in Scotland being created by Scotland for Scotland's benefit by people in Edinburgh or wherever else you wish to locate the Central Bank of Scotland, which doesn't have to be in Edinburgh, of course, because the mistake of locating everything in the capital city shouldn't be something that an independent Scotland should perhaps replicate. But the point is, we can't rely on England to do this because we know at best England has a grudging charity towards Scotland, mean grants, as I will describe them in my national column on Monday morning, because I happened to write it last night, so I know what it already says. And it doesn't care about outcomes for Scotland. Frankly, Scotland, as far as it's concerned, is seen in that policy of exploitation for carbon credits. It's just a place to be exploited. It's a place to be exploited for the purposes of the land mass. It's a place to be exploited for its energy, but it's not a place to deliver love for the people of Scotland. That's the last thing that I think we can say that London has. And so if we're talking about faith, hope, and love, what we need is Scotland to have faith in its institutions that create money. And that means that we need Scotland to be tapping on the keyboard. It does need to be somebody in Scotland doing that, not somebody in London doing that. We need to have somebody who's accountable to Scotland doing that, so that when we record these transactions, we know it's subject to Scottish regulation to deliver the information that Scotland needs so that Scotland can manage itself. And Robin talked about the fact we don't have reliable statistics in Scotland, something that I've talked about for a decade or more with regard to GERS and the crap data that's included within it, because we don't have good data. And if money is information as data to inform decision making, and that is fundamental to its role, then we need somebody in Scotland deciding how to use that information. We can't rely on someone in England to do that. And we can't rely on English regulation because, frankly, English regulation, as we know, is failing. We haven't got a national statistics in England, well, the UK, notionally, at present, that works. People don't answer the surveys. The government won't invest in data. The government won't invest in regulatory environments which are suitable for the people of the UK as a whole. And so we have, for example, the absurd situation where benefits fraud is probably really quite small in the whole of the UK. Corporation tax fraud is a figure several times the number of benefit losses, and yet the government doesn't invest in tackling corporation tax abuses. It chooses to invest in tackling benefit fraud. It gets the value judgments wrong. And we need those value judgments on this data to be right. And so money is genuinely about faith in the economy of Scotland. Having a Scottish currency is about understanding that only Scotland can release the value in Scotland. You have to put it like that because that's the way the story needs to be told, because that's the way it is. And that value has to be released for the people of Scotland above all else, which means the Scottish tax system has to be guided in that way to make sure that when the money the Scottish government creates on behalf of the people of Scotland is reclaimed, it is reclaimed in a way that ensures that value is maximised within the country as a whole, and that means delivering it to the people who needs it. And that can't be done without control of the currency, because without control of the currency, you can't control the tax system. It's as simple as that. If they're the flip side of each other, you can't do it without having control of the money. So money is about faith in the potential of Scotland. It's about hope in the fact that that potential might be released. But most of all, and I'm running really well within time here, money, a Scottish currency, is, I think, about love for Scotland. It's about saying, we believe in Scotland above all else. And that's why we want our own currency, because that's the only way we will deliver for the people of Scotland, because they need it to deliver for themselves, to make it their own, for their own benefit, and for the benefit of those who are going to come after them. Because no good government, no good society thinks only about itself. It thinks about those who will come. And that's the thing that is missing. It's the thing that's missing within Scottish politics, as far as I see it, which is at the moment, and I'm blaming the SNP. I'm not talking about all parties here, let's be clear, but I do read this in the SNP's leadership. Again, I don't read this in the SNP membership. I make that also very clear, but I do see it in the SNP leadership. There's this terrible fear that they haven't got enough love for Scotland, that they can trust it, and that they believe in it from now and until time immemorial. And yet, Scotland has been a country before it was in the union with England. It will be a country after the union with England. And again, look at my article to come on Monday in the National, and I talk about the fact that surely in 2026, if we have a Scottish government in Holyrood, if we have a Welsh government in Cardiff, we have a Sinn Féin government in Northern Ireland, and we have the three countries excluding England in the union, with governments who believe in independence, then we have to take independence seriously. Scotland is going to be independent. I genuinely believe that. I'm sure it's going to happen. I think it'll happen peaceably. I can't tell you precisely how it will happen, but I think that the tipping point is coming very close. The idea that England has something to offer to the people of Scotland, to the people of Wales, to the people of Northern Ireland is becoming a joke. England hasn't got anything for the people of England, is what people are telling me in England. So why the heck should anybody in Scotland believe it has? And yet that's the point. Scotland has something to believe in. England hasn't. Scotland could believe in its own currency, but the currency is that symbol of faith in the country. It's the symbol of faith in the value of the country. It's the symbol of the faith in the power of the country to deliver for itself. And it's the symbol of the faith of the Scottish people to manage the affairs of Scotland for themselves through the regulation of its currency, through the regulation of its banks, through the regulation of its tax system, to deliver outcomes that would work. And those things are all inextricably linked. But the point is, you can never do them unless there's somebody from Scotland tapping the keyboard. And therefore, Scotland must have its own currency. And I know that's the subject of the next discussion as well. But I wanted to put this in terms of a narrative, because I think that a lot of what we need half the time is narratives. And that's what I just told you. I've told you a story about believing in Scotland. And I think that's the story that Scotland needs. It has to believe in itself. And my point is, if only the SNP leadership did it, if it was willing to talk these narratives, then I think we would have a Scottish currency much higher up the agenda than we have. And that's what I want. I'm done. I'm open to questions. And there's a deathly silence from the room.
What a great story.
Did anyone hear a word I said?
Now there's a couple of hands up at the front. Surely we have more questions for Richard than that. The mic's coming. Please speak into it, because we'll go William and then, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. These two. Same name.
Hi, Richard. Can you hear me? It's William Thompson here.
A very familiar voice. Hi.
How you doing?
Seem to be amongst friends this afternoon.
Yeah, it's lovely. A Fresh Start document that was just released by the Scottish Government, similar to the 2022 paper, hardly mentions tax at all in an independent Scotland, and it doesn't say the phrase progressive taxation or redistribution in either of those papers that plan for an independent Scotland. So I'm just wondering if you could just briefly outline what changes you would make to the tax system in Scotland in an independent.
Well, thank you. I did write a couple of white papers on this whole idea of how I would change the tax system that Scotland will inevitably inherit from the Union. Let's be honest. That's how it worked in Ireland in 1922. I've looked at it. I've seen how it worked. That is the precedent. I don't think there's another way to make it work, because tax systems are complex admin systems and you can't build them from scratch. So we would have to take over the English tax system and adapt it for use. And in a sense, I've written out the agenda here in two ways. One is in those white papers, and that would mean, for example, looking at the whole structure of tax in Scotland and how we manage tax through a proper tax administration, which would not be accountable to the financial power elites as it is in England or in the UK at present, where the members of the board of HM Revenue and Customs come from the banks and the big four firms of accountants and everything else, and run it as if it's a corporation, which is absolutely absurd. But we'd have to have a tax system for Scotland that was run by people from Scotland, representative people from Scotland, being interested in how the tax system delivered for the people of Scotland. So the first thing would be a most massive change in culture with regard to tax. That tax is not something which is imposed upon Scotland, but which is something in which the people of Scotland participate. And that has to be symbolised right from the start and right in the way you manage the tax authority for Scotland, to show that people are listened to and heard. And that would be important as well with regard to consultations and so on. And I think that would filter down. But then I would suggest more recently, I've written what I called the Taxing Wealth Report. And that was published a year or so ago now. And it looked at so many of the failures inside the UK's tax system. And it didn't tackle all of them. I only looked at the ones which actually were the obvious things to tackle in the first instance. So I didn't discuss land value, for example, because there isn't a land value tax in the UK at present, so there wasn't one I could adapt. I didn't look at innovations that radical. I just looked at how to adapt the systems we've got and pointed out some of the glaringly, obviously stupid things that stop us having a progressive tax system, but which Scotland could address. Capital gains in Scotland could be taxed at the same rate as income tax. There is no reason why £1 arriving in a person's pocket from a profit should be taxed less than £1 from another source. There is no reason why work should be taxed more heavily in Scotland than income from investments. So there should be an investment income surcharge of 15%, I suggested. And what is Rachel Reeves now talking about? She is talking about this idea, by the way, but she's talking about applying it to work undertaken by people in limited liability partnerships. Now, the vast majority of them are very high earning, and I haven't got a problem with increasing tax rates on high earners. But she's still talking about applying this idea of increased effective national insurance rates to unearned income. You know, this is just absolutely absurd that work is the thing that is taxed most heavily, when landlords in Scotland, when bankers in Scotland, when people who live off interest in Scotland, the people who live off rents in Scotland are going to be taxed less. This does not make social sense. So that should be happening. Do those two things, by the way, in the whole of the UK right now, and you would close every idea that anybody has got about a black hole, and you would raise more money than a wealth tax could by themselves. But you'd also, for example, charge VAT on financial services. And again, there's no reason why not. Scotland won't be in the EU at the time. And if it was later on, well, you could change back. But in the meantime, you'd be putting a powerful signal out that financial services, which are deeply extractive from the economy, let's be clear about it. Most of the financial services industry is simply about sucking value out of the economy, not adding value to the economy, should be subject to VAT, but it isn't. That would be charged largely on the wealthy because they're the people who buy financial services. What else could I do? Look, I could keep going. I mean, the point is, I'm making it clear that we could run Scotland's tax system very, very differently. We would have a focus on redistribution. We'd be talking about less at the bottom. We'd be talking about more effective payments of benefits to those who need it. And we wouldn't call them benefits. We'll call them social security, because this is a safety net to help people who are in need. It's not a benefit. It's not some form of charity. This is about participating in society, and we'll be doing all of that to make sure that money circulated better. And again, this is about this issue of, if you like, faith, hope, and love. We'd have faith that Scotland will want to recirculate the money within it from those who have to those who haven't, so that those who haven't could spend. But the consequence would be stronger local economies, better local shops, more local jobs, stronger revenues for the government as a consequence, and, bizarrely, more wealth for the wealthy who own those businesses in all probability. but we're talking about creating virtuous cycles for Scotland. And if we did that and didn't presume that we'd have this situation which the UK as a whole has got now, where money is extracted rather than added by everything that government does, we could end up with a much better Scotland. Sorry, it was a long answer, William.
Good afternoon. I'm a listener to your podcast every morning on YouTube. It's part of my daily cycle, or part of my daily life. So, oh, sorry. Right, as I was saying, I enjoy your YouTube stuff every day, more or less. I am not a numerate person. I am a teacher, or former teacher, president of the IS, world's oldest teacher and trade union. So my question is pedagogical. That is to say about teaching and learning. When one approaches teaching and learning people in the classroom, and the public are no different, the context in which you teach is almost as important of what you actually say. And if I can give one example in a wider sense, when I became a senior official, I started to buy suits at £600 or £700, shirts at £80, cufflinks and ties at £50. And when you walk into a room dressed like that, people make certain assumptions about you. And then what you say, they tend to listen to you. On the other hand, there's the other side of it. And so the point you made earlier on about stories, I think we need more of those stories, because I think because of the counterintuitive nature and because of the mainstream media and most of the journalists don't understand what they're reading, there is a need for more stories. I only started to understand what you've been talking about when I understood that in 1941-42 Britain was broke, and by the 1950s and 60s they had done this, that and the next thing. And I realised that they must have done it from... So I knew that intuitively. There must be a truth behind it. So the point is this. It's about the stories. How do we take more stories together? And just one example. If we were to say we're a Scottish bank, all you need is build a building in somewhere absurd to actually take the argument. In other words, I don't mean any disrespect to any particular town, but take somewhere that people would consider farcical and say that's where we'll build a central bank. People would then get counterfired, if you see what I mean. So maybe we need more of the taking the argument to the doubters. Like Polanski, for instance, is whenever someone attacks him, he uses that. The numerate here are getting fed up with me. So I'll hand it over. There you go.
I hear everything you say, and we talk about it a lot. I've now got a team behind those videos here. The team is me, my wife, and my two sons. They have both joined me now. And one of the great advantages, that was never a plan, and it may not stay this way, but they actually are quite excited by making stories. And they see the world differently from me. Each of us has worked out what stories work for us. I am quite technical. My sons love visual. They're encouraging me to be more visual. We need to explore levels, and there's an advantage to having the blog because it can be more technical than the videos. Technical videos don't seem to work, but this storytelling is fundamental, and we need to try them out, and we need to be brave. I like what you said. You reminded me of something that John Christensen and I were heavily reminded of when we created the Tax Justice Network. Ian Mercado, who was still the Labour MP for Reading at that time, we're talking about a while ago as a result, said, look, both of you guys come from professional backgrounds, carry on wearing your suits, wearing your ties, wearing your smart leather shoes, etc. Because you will look as though you're the professionals in the room and you'll be saying words that nobody expects from you. And it will be deeply disruptive. So we need to find ways to deliver deeply disruptive stories, which are credible. That's the problem that we've got, and that's the thing that we need to create. And it's why I wake up every morning and write those blogs. It's why every day we record videos, because we're trying to find stories that work, stories about change. And don't give up on that process is my answer. We haven't got good stories. We haven't got the best stories. I've just tried a new one. I've never tried the version I've just tried on you before. I don't know whether it works or not. If anybody's got feedback from me later on, I'll be interested. I'll probably turn it into a video at some time. The point is, unless we try, we don't discover what literally is like the spaghetti that sticks to the wall. We have to find out which bits stick and which slide down it. And until we find what sticks, we haven't got a narrative to sell to people about what Scotland's going to be.
Thank you, Richard. We've got just time for 2 more questions. Tim's saying, no, we've got no more time for questions. Sorry, guys. We're going to have to wrap up there. I would just like to throw in a comment, because with all the white papers and the great stories that we hear at conferences like this, and then the examples we have of people like Richard who are, you know, telling stories every day and trying it in different ways and reaching thousands, I don't know how many people. A nice challenge for next year's conference would be for people to come back with stories that they've tried.
In a month, it is.
A month, yeah, well, that's quite quick, but yeah. Anyway, that's my parting thought, but
a month we do.
just join me in thanking Richard, and then I think Tim's going to speak.